Let's go now to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, Beimnet, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
We got the SBR executive order signed last Thursday after we had recorded and published our episode. Crypto Summit Friday. Bitcoin not really reacting positively yet.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, I think there were high expectations going in. So most people expected this, given the executive orders that he signed early on and all of the tweeting that he did, or Truth Social posts.
Truthing.
And so, folks had already, baked this in. And as far as I'm concerned, the U.S. government still hasn't bought a single penny of Bitcoin. And doing it in a revenue neutral way that doesn't have any kind of like adverse impact, is quite challenging, right? Like they can sell gold to buy Bitcoin in theory, and that's delta neutral to taxpayers. But there's also a lot of gold holding Americans. And what signals does that send? And what kind of market impact does that have? And, you're at a time when, he's cutting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs in the federal government, as well as trying to spend $1 trillion less every year. Like, how can we possibly justify owning Bitcoin in that environment, from a political lens standpoint? And so, I think it's really hard to justify. In addition, I get it. You want to support crypto, but I think buying the crypto asset itself is not really in the best interest of the U.S., from the standpoint of, if you think your currency is the best, flight to quality, flight to safety, global reserve currency, why does it need to be backed by anything? Gold, Bitcoin, et cetera. It's full faith in the Federal Reserve and U.S. government, right? And so, there's a lot of theoretical concepts that I disagree with the market broadly on. In addition, the hope is that it's, it makes other countries want to hold this as a reserve asset, and that's counterintuitive to what the U.S. wants, which is dollar as a reserve asset. And thirdly, of the countries that had the ability to buy it as buy the asset, which one of them hasn't done it yet and that will do it? And are they meaningful enough to move the needle? I don't think the Chinese are going to be like, oh, I want to go long Bitcoin like crazy. I don't think the EU is interested in that, as they're trying to spend a ton of money. Yes, sure, you can get some, third world countries like El Salvador and some Latin American countries to be supportive of this stuff. But again, that's not going to really move the needle. And so I just think, this is a market that got a little ahead of itself in terms of thinking that the implications of the SBR would be that meaningful. Personally, as far as I know, the way Bitcoin has behaved since the election, it's just another risk asset right now. And if stocks keep going down, Bitcoin's most likely going to go down. If Apple dips another 10, 15% and I get the opportunity to buy, one of the best companies in the world in Bitcoin, I'm going to have to think twice about it, right? And so, and then I think the other big implication is with respect to alts. Clearly Bitcoin was differentiated as being better than everything else, even ETH, right? And so, if the U.S. government isn't buying alts, which it doesn't look like they will be doing, right? Then your bull case for alts is usage, adoption, et cetera. And then again, you
Then you're looking at the case I've been making that crypto is the dog that chased the car, and it's now got to learn how to drive the car.
Yeah,
that can happen, but it's not a regulatory catalyst.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
That can happen, and I completely agree.
Yeah.
I just think that some of the token prices are pricing in that happening, and then it happening again, and then it happening again.
I think that's right. I think, look, I hear your point. I think, my boss, Chris Ferraro, said it really well last week that revenue neutral or not, you're still selling the dollar when you buy Bitcoin with it, right? And that politically might not be easy, right? But I will say...
No, I will cite the Republican states that have been trying to pass Bitcoin purchase legislation that have struggled.
Yeah, some of them have struggled. Wyoming rejected it.
Right, absolutely.
Texas, I think, passed it.
And I think you can be on the side of believing in Bitcoin as an asset, right? And believing in crypto as a huge efficiency gain in the future of finance, but also on the side of we don't need to be purchasing this with tax dollars.
I agree. I think that's right.
And you can hold both of those opinions and not be anti-crypto.
Okay, but now the president has ordered that they look for strategies, right? They develop strategies for acquiring more in a budget neutral way. So presumably there will be work that's being done at the Commerce and Treasury departments to see if there is a strategy that makes sense.
Yeah,
They're
if
not
people wanna
ordered. They're not
donate
ordered
Bitcoin.
to buy. Yeah. Well, there are. To your point about the alts, right? The digital asset stockpile and now the strategic Bitcoin reserve. What a swing from, because I was saying this the whole time. The market. We've been saying this for months that, SBR or not, that shouldn't be like trying to caution people, like, because it was very unlikely to happen. And, we predicted in our predictions report on December 31st, I said the U.S. would stockpile but not acquire new Bitcoin. And now they're ordered to try to figure out if they can acquire it. And I'm saying it ain't going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, and I just believe in due process and kind of judicial, legislative, executive branch and balance of power, right? Like all spending bills need to originate from Congress. It's a body of elected officials that represent the populace. Like there's a reason the founding fathers structured it that
Sure.
way. And like if a bunch of congressmen can't get together and agree to buy something, then it's
Maybe it shouldn't be bought. I think
Correct.
that's right. But
again, I'm not.
But
This
again-
isn't me giving approval to what Congress does or
No,
not.
no.
I'm just saying.
And look,
like,
I think
like
this.
there's a system. In
I
place.
think your view is very well founded. I think it makes a lot of sense. I can tell you that a lot of people I just came back from D.C. for a big roundtable that it was co-hosted by Senator Cynthia Lummis, and there's plenty of people in the Bitcoin industry who don't agree with that sentiment. Do think it's important to have a strategic reserve. Michael Saylor is one of them, obviously. He says that Bitcoin is not a digital currency, it's digital capital, and that stablecoins are digital currency, and is pushing for both. And if you have a stablecoin explosion, then the Bitcoin can support the balance sheet of the government. And that's the case. Regardless of whether I agree with it or not, it is officially the strategy of the U.S. government. And one of the simplest ways I think that they could acquire Bitcoin in a revenue neutral way. The alts and the digital asset stockpile they're prohibited from buying more alts. They're effectively sell-only mode. Now, hodl, sure, or sell. And that discretion is in the yet unformed office of the digital asset stockpile. So you could say maybe dump some foreign created altcoins and buy Bitcoin with that stuff that government and the people don't even really know the government has, right? And that might be the fact that I would just guess that if you looked at the list of coins that we think the government holds, which, by the way, they're trying to figure out what they actually hold, and there's apparently really good reason for that.
I just
that
struggle
might be
with,
the way that a buy does happen. I think
fair enough.
that
And
avoids the political stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, and I get trying to support this ecosystem and this asset class, but again, I'm like, okay, I think the government owns 23 million bucks of BNB.
Yeah.
And so they could easily convert it from BNB.
That would be my top target.
BTC, and that's a chunky one. But then I look at the 70,000 people at Veteran Affairs that are getting laid off, and you're telling me you want to buy Bitcoin instead of supporting people that supported veterans for the past at least 4 years or so. Biden is it's a very hard pill to swallow. And how do you go to talk to the guy in Kansas whose military site is getting downgraded, and how do you go talk to these people at the next election, which is midterms, and be like, yeah, I shut down this wing of this Air Force base in Kansas because I thought it was unnecessary, but I bought $23 million worth of Bitcoin.
I get it.
How's that going to hit home with the farmers that are losing?
Well, I don't know. There are a lot of people that own Bitcoin too, though.
No, absolutely.
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I think that is the interesting thing about this political calculus here, right? And I guess we'll just have to wait and see more info on it. But I know it's not going to happen soon. I don't think people realize the White House and the executive order have established this as the policy, but implementing this policy is much more complicated than I think people realize.
And I also just think that crypto was a main focus and people were thinking about it, but there's so many other things. Even from the administration's point of view, they have so many big things
they do.
Like NASDAQ just went down 13%.
Yeah, I know.
S&P just fell, but people are feeling less good about
I get it.
spending all this stuff, and we're talking about recessionary fears, and you want to talk to me about buying Bitcoin right now?
I know.
I
I hear you.
I get it. How many Americans own Bitcoin?
I don't know, 50 million maybe.
50
I'm
million.
making that up.
Sure.
I don't actually think it's
How
that
many?
high. But
How many
I
Americans?
think the
own
White House said it
U.S.
was
equities.
a lot more. Almost. How many households are there?
Yeah, like almost any household that can
Pretty much
afford it,
anyone
basically.
pretty much anyone that's ever had a job, to be honest, has likely got some kind of 401k or retirement plan or
Again.
pension or yeah. I agree. I hear you. It's
But
tricky.
yeah, I think the main story is the economy's slowing down. I heard a little tidbit that from the Walmart CEO. He's saying that consumers are stretched and they're at their last dollars. Savings rate is really low. Credit card balances keep increasing. Delinquencies on credit cards keep increasing. Auto delinquencies keep increasing. I just saw a stat that auto loan rates just spiked higher. And the main guy I follow on this is saying that it's partially a function of them trying to recoup the revenues from the delinquencies that they estimate that they're going to have, not because they think interest rates are going higher, right? And so they're like, Walmart.
That's real economy stuff.
Real economy stuff. Walmart is the single largest employer in the U.S. outside of the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm.
So when their CEO tells you that consumers are strapped,
They got a good view into that. Yeah. Yeah, and then the CPI came in soft today.
it did come in
But
soft.
that's partially could be because people don't have a lot of money to spend, right? I mean, if consumer weakness though can contribute to deflation, right?
I'm personally like, I am so tired of looking at backward-looking data and data measures that everybody's like, oh, look, slice and dice it this way, that way, and it supports this view, doesn't support the other view. Here's what I know. I know the labor market's slowing down, and I know that labor figures on a 3-month forward and a 6-month forward are going to look much poorer, right? You need to sustain above, I think 125,000 job gains per month to
Offset retirees and stuff.
offset,
Yeah.
correct, and to keep the labor market balanced,
Yeah.
right? What did we see during the last jobs report? We saw the underemployment rate, or the U6 employment rate, jump by 50 basis points. The amount of part-time workers increased by 500,000 jobs. The average hourly work week went down, right? So people are working less, and they're not working as much as they would like, to figures and changes that are typically leading indicators for a further slowdown, right? And we haven't even seen the government job data hit. When you lose a job, there's a multiplier effect, right? You stop eating out, right? So the restaurant gets less. The restaurant has suppliers and vendors, right? And
They buy less.
They buy less, right?
Yeah.
There's a velocity to money, and so when that velocity slows down, your impact isn't just that one job lost. It's really much more, and so market participants can focus on the data print that covers the February CPI, but what does Trueflation tell you? Trueflation is below 1.5%, right? My cousin visited me from DC this weekend, and all he tells me is about people getting laid off, right? It is that is what the Northern Virginia, Maryland, DC folks.
Have you seen the housing stuff?
The
there?
housing stuff, DC
crazy.
proper hasn't been impacted, but other stuff is getting impacted, right? Home builders are doing poorly, right? There's rents are coming down.
No, but there's the condo, all the condos for all these people that worked in the federal government that have already been laid off, and other people who think they might be laid off. I mean, how many people work for the federal government? 2 million people or something?
A lot.
It's a lot, right?
But it's not just the fact that they're getting laid off. It's the level of uncertainty impacts spending.
Right.
Right? The level of economic uncertainty, there are charts that measure it. It's through the roof, through resistance, technical breakout, and measures of volatility. I mean, the VIX has spiked.
Yeah, you think it's are you impressed that Bitcoin's holding in the 80s given this environment? I mean, I know to be clear, we've been coming down. For all we know, there's more to go. But I think
it's hold, and then fold. I don't think these. I think
so. You think these levels can break? And
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what a wild roller coaster.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I mean, there's also. I mean, the caveat to that is, the regulation policy has never been better for crypto. It's never been easier to buy crypto.
To me, I think
never been easier to
and
be
not
a
even
crypto
just
company.
Bitcoin, but if you look at some of the DeFi apps and stuff that really work well, you're getting much better risk reward entry points. I think in this environment.
No, absolutely.
So same thing. I mean, I don't think this impacts our long term view of Bitcoin.
The long term view of Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin will be well through 100K, and
And beyond.
And beyond
Yeah.
at some point. Right here, right now, though, it does not.
Everything looks pretty weak. I mean, you got the dollar and the 10-year, and even gold is,
Gold's actually up.
it's up today. Yeah.
It's up.
But there were some sell-off days, like when Bitcoin was selling off, that even gold was selling off, and it was basically everyone was just like buying dollars, like just everything they have.
No, I mean it's a really tough environment.
Okay, so and then last thing, if inflation by, I guess core PCE would be the one the Fed really cares about, but and unemployment is up. If inflation is tampered and unemployment's up, we're looking at cuts, right, from the Fed.
Yes, but there's a small caveat. The read-through into core PCE was actually a bit more positive for PCE, like higher PCE.
Yeah, interesting.
But you'll get more of that data tomorrow with PPI. But again, it's backward looking. Like we really need to be thinking about like what is the wealth effect going to do when S&P and NASDAQ drop 10% plus in correction territory? Like how is that going to impact spending? How's that going to impact corporations in terms of their hiring plans? Right? Are they going to stop hiring? Are they going to lay off more people? Right? Like it's really hard to justify laying off people when your stock's at all-time highs and going higher. When it's moving off a cliff, right? It's a lot easier to be like, hey, like I have a fiduciary duty to my shareholders to, increase returns and maximize profits. So I need to lay off my 10% of my worst workers. Like it's a lot easier to do that type of stuff. And so, I think we're headed for a slowdown in the U.S. It could be a recession. Depends on how you define a recession. Is it 2 quarters of negative GDP growth? Is it
20% stock market
correction?
Yeah.
Whatever. But if the administration is really serious about cutting spending, like that's a big deal. Yeah. $2 trillion or $1 trillion less in spending per year is a lot. And my final point is, I'd like to remind folks that Trump, at some point, will cause a government shutdown. Last presidency, he had a 35-day government shutdown, and that was the longest in history, right? And these guys seem to have a commitment to actually doing fiscal right. And I think it's a correct commitment, by the way.
It's ambitious, and it's
ambitious,
impressive.
But like normally the ambitious goals are the only ones worth doing. And I think if I was a president and I was thinking 10, 20, 30 years out, these are exactly the type of policies I'd be trying to pursue. And what do you do if you're a second-term president? You touch the third rail. Yeah. Which is what? Entitlement spending and military spending.
Yep.
And I think he'll go there. And if you go there, that's shutdown.
This is one of the first people that's presidents in decades that's had the appetite for short-term gain to get short-term pain to get long-term gain. And the problems in the country are big. Yeah. But they affect the market. So pay attention, people. This is the sit forward moment in your chair. I think when it comes to markets. All right, our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you.